unintended byproducts of that federal initiative was to focus on standardized testing and measurable achievement, all of which are extremely positive. Do you get the sense that because of that focus that the arts really do need to be underscored more in the kind of dialogue we're having in the federal government on education?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, the short version of No Child Left Behind is that Senator Kennedy and the Democrats, particularly in the Senate, who passionately care about education issues, back when this was originally authorized, entered into an arrangement with President Bush that they would go along with the testing regime, understanding that it would put additional pressure on schools, and in return the administration would provide additional funding so that that new set of demands on the schools would not be obliged to cannibalize other programs in order to sustain itself. And then 9/11 happened, and the president came back and said, sorry, I'll take my side of the deal, but we're not going to help make good on my promise to support the schools. And so now we have this situation, and it varies school by school, but you see arts programs going. You see gifted programs going. You see science labs going. You see after-school programs going. Thankfully here in Rhode Island, particularly in the Providence area, there's an enormous amount of initiative coming out of the private sector and out of the nonprofit sector to try to rebuild some of that. But the debate that is going to happen on No Child Left Behind is going to be very, very much informed by that original failure and the need to go back and make sure that these programs are all rebuilt for the reasons that Dana said. This is how you reach out to children and show them what their futures can be.
And Chairman, certainly there's been a lot of attention, particularly here in Rhode Island, on the science and math curriculums. And I know that there's a lot of financial resources that are going into shoring up those areas. Is there an argument that can be made that the arts complement advancement in science and advancement in mathematics?
Well, I mean, the solution is not to shut down something. It's to complete and add and continue to invest in education, because kids need a complete education. I mean, they need everything from poetry to physics, and and we have to make sure that all of those options are available, because life has all of those options for future destinies. And so, I think that what scares me is that without intending to, on a national basis over the last about 30 years, local school boards, county boards, state organizations have systematically shut down arts education in most American public schools because of a short-term budget thing or a short-term issue. And now, we are in a country where access to arts education is largely a function of your parents' income. And I think that is a shameful situation for democracy.
Senator, we have although we're a compact sort of state, 30 miles east to west, 50 miles north to south, 400 miles of shoreline. I love saying that. I think there's a great disparity between the different communities in our state as far as resources and availability to arts and cultural events and activities. And I'm wondering the role that you see the different kinds of organizations that we have here in our state playing, going beyond their expected and anticipated audiences. I mean, there are arts resources here in Providence that could be of benefit to the communities in Newport, vice versa. There are roles that we can play in sort of reaching out into communities. Certainly the support we've gotten from the National Endowment for the Arts has helped us reach into what is loosely defined as underserved communities. Yeah. And based on your experience both as an advocate for the arts and as a general officer of the state, I wonder what you can tell us about the need to get into some of those communities.
Well, clearly there are significantly underserved communities for the reason that Dana mentioned of income disparity, but also particularly from the related reason that people at the losing end of the income disparity in this country very often have to dedicate every waking hour of their lives to trying to get by. And so they don't have the luxury of leisure time and of being able to organize it, to go to an event, particularly if it requires that it be paid for. I think it's the best place we can focus is on kids and on schools. And there are huge disparities that we see. We live out here in Providence, all the time. Providence is a city where the middle class is essentially evacuating the city in order to make sure that their kids can get into good public schools in other parts of the state, and it is leaving the people at the bottom of the economic ladder and people who are well off enough to pay for private school education for their kids. And it's a phenomenon that is not good for the city, and Mayor Cicilline is working very hard to turn it around, but it is going to take a concerted effort. It goes back to No Child Left Behind and how important it is to rebuild those schools. It's, I think of the soliloquy we just heard from Richard III, and Dana was kind enough to point out that it, in this political season, had a lot to call to mind for all of us in politics. But anybody who experiences what everybody experiences in life, which is having to make a choice and then realizing you made the wrong one, not necessarily the morally wrong one, but the one that just didn't work out, the wrong team won, and then having to pay the consequences, in this case being marched off to have your head lopped off on a block, and how do you deal with that? And that soliloquy was a very human way and a very kind of brave way of facing up to that situation. And so anybody can understand that if it's put in a context that is accessible to them. And that's where I think we need to continue this emphasis. And that's why I'm so proud to have been the appointee to the National Council on the Arts.
Great. Another couple of questions, and then I want to open it up a little bit to the audience. Mr. Chairman, tomorrow night the New York Philharmonic is performing in North Korea. And it really, to me, underscores the sense of globalism that we're dealing with in society in general. Rhode Island is a culturally, ethnically, racially diverse state. And I wonder if you could comment a little bit about the kinds of things that the endowment and you personally are doing and thinking of as far as art bridging the divides that exist between communities.
Well, I mean, you can talk about both internationally and domestically. One of the things that shocked me when I came to Washington about a little over 5 years ago was that virtually all of the cultural exchanges that once existed between the United States and the rest of the world had been shut down during the 90s. And at the endowment, you could have counted our cultural exchanges on the fingers of one hand. And most of them were tiny programs involving just a few individuals. And in the State Department, they had basically shut their whole USIA, U.S. Information Agency, which was a spectacularly successful organization, down. And so now we've wanted to do that, and but we want to make sure we handle the domestic things first. But what I'm really pleased with at the moment was that the credibility of the endowment is so high now in Washington that the State Department has now come to us, and we have partnerships. We just got back from Egypt. We have partnerships in Mexico, in Russia, in a number of countries. We're developing one with China. And I think it's very important that the United States have conversations with the rest of the world that aren't primarily about power or money. Now, which is not to say that you don't have to have those necessary conversations that are political or economic, but it's a way, in a sense, of having people understand what they have in common as an ongoing part of the relations of countries. So we're very proud that we're now able, in a sense, to re-engage the rest of the world with the United States. Now, within the U.S., I mean, one of the interesting things about the endowment, this is an interesting historical fact. The endowment was really taken from a relatively small organization to a large organization by an unlikely person, Richard Nixon. And Nixon was in the country in a period not unlike right now, which in the country was very divided. And the reason he invested in the arts was he felt that the arts was actually something that tended to build community, that tended to cross divides. And I absolutely believe this, and I think that by bringing people into arts groups, especially art forms that are from other ethnic groups, cultural groups, other regions, it tends to build an appreciation of our common humanity.
And Senator, actually, it's less a question and more of a statement. I think personally, from